Alrighty, everybody. Hey, everybody. Steve here, the retired hobby tech guy, and today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic. Yes, my Korean wife and I, we moved to the KKK capital of Colorado. You might ask, how in the world did that happen? Yeah, we're gonna go back into the annals of time. I know usually I do like hobby stuff, 3D printing, and miniature painting. Being an American expat here in Korea. And but way before that, we used to live in the United States. And we're going to do a little trip down memory lane, especially since I've had COVID 2.0 and getting over that. And I'm about 95% done. So we're rocking it. Went to the gym yesterday, so we're rocking a vanilla protein latte. Yeah, I got about 20 grams of protein in here, so. And to be honest, not bad. I could do that again. So anyway, today's going to be really interesting. If you want to leave comments are there. I can read your comments through the advent of technology and the streaming software that I have, so feel free to do that. Before we jump right in, though, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that, and that would help the channel, which I just got monetized. I just got my channel monetized. So that's kind of a big thing, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so now that you've hit like and subscribe, we'll jump into the story. Kind of a long story short, I was born, dysfunctional home, multiple dads, stepdads and so on and so forth. Ended up joining the Army at the age of 17. Yes, I did delayed entry. I actually turned 18 when I was in basic training. So yeah, I left home with the clothes on my back and I think like $14 or something like that in my pocket. It wasn't much. I remember I had some Nike tennis shoes, some Levi jeans, a wife beater t-shirt. See, I don't stray from the fashion. Wife beater t-shirt and a jean jacket, a wallet, a comb, and the glasses on my face and long hair, and went off and joined the Army. Interesting note, when I joined, I had to get my parents' permission, so I had to do that, but that was part of a deal because I got in trouble with the law, and so if I did something with my life, according to the judge, he could make it all go away. So yeah, it was an interesting thing, and I figured the Army would be a good place to go because I didn't want to go to school anymore. So anyway, did the Army, ended up overseas, saw my wife across the crowded room, our eyes met, we fell in love, and I courted her for a year and then asked for her hand in marriage and her permission from her parents, and next thing you know, we're married, and boom, we did a career in the military, which was, ups and downs, and she was probably the best thing that happened to me. She's an incredible woman. We're totally opposite in everything that we do. She's short and beautiful. I'm big and muscular. She's intelligent. I'm okay in that aspect. So anyway, it ends up, I finished the time in the military, and we had been a lot. We did over 20 years in the Army, and she was awesome. So I retired, and next thing you know, it's like I went back to Colorado. And it was like, okay, I'm going to go back to Colorado. And the whole thing kind of centered around doing real estate investing. I had done real estate investing while I was in the military. My parents and family saw what I was doing, and they were like, oh my gosh, wow, this could be a thing. And there's a whole story on that. Maybe we'll do that in another video. So I retired from the military, but I was enlisted, so I didn't have enough money to retire. Okay, it was like, I still need to get a job and stuff like that. And in Pueblo, Colorado, that's where my family was at and where we were going to do our real estate endeavors. And that was a whole crazy story. So anyway, it ended up that during that, I applied for the Colorado Department of Corrections. It's not a job that anybody dreams of. It's not like, little kids playing and they're like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a soldier. That's what I said when I was little. Nobody says, I want to grow up and be a correctional officer. I want to work in a prison. Yeah, nobody says that. And after being in the military for 20 years and 12 years overseas and kind of seeing the lay of the land and all that stuff, used to authority, chain of command, and so on and so forth, I ran into an old Army buddy who was actually my boss in Korea. And funny story with that, he's like, man, you got to get a job in corrections. He goes, it's the easiest thing ever. If you thought, military had its problems, but, you just show up, you count people, and, babysit, which is what you did in the military, and then you get a paycheck and some good benefits. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. That's not really what I aspired to, was to join Department of Corrections, even though I had some previous incarceration on my end, and I also had, my father was in prison. So here's an interesting fact. My real dad ended up, he was in Vietnam. He had drug and drinking problems and anger management, PTSD, all those great things, courtesy of Uncle Sam. And I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because I got in trouble. I ended up getting PTSD and a number of things. So thank you, Uncle Sam. Anyway, so my dad divorced my mom. This was a long time ago. And as I had joined the military at 17, I actually was in basic training. My mom gave me a call and said, hey, the Colorado prosecutor's office is going to be calling you. And I'm like, what? Now, I hadn't seen my real dad since I was like 13, 14, maybe 15, 14 years old, I think it was. And long story short, him and his fiance, wife, person that he was with at the time, he did some bad stuff. Now, a little bit of backstory on him. He was into drugs and alcohol, anger management problems, and just, horrible, horrible things. But then he turned his life around. He ended up getting a degree. I think he got a couple degrees. He ended up working overseas, and then he came back to Colorado. He ended up, he was, I think he worked at a university. I can't remember where, but he got advanced degrees. It looked like he had really turned himself around. And, I'd seen him, I think the last time I saw him, I was like 13 or 14. And it wasn't well. But after that, he got his life turned around. Well, then karma came back and snapped him in the ass. It was pretty horrendous, because it ends up that him and his fiance, wife, person, whatever she was, they had an argument, and it was about kids. So, somebody wanted kids, other person didn't want kids. Obviously, there was other issues going on, and he pulled out a double-barrel shotgun and shot her at point-blank range. He kind of unalived her. So, there's that. He put the shotgun on the kitchen table, called the police, and turned himself in. So, that was a thing. Her family was well-to-do. Apparently, her family had some pull and yank and all kinds of stuff, and it didn't fare well with my dad, and whose name was Robert Mock, and he ended up going to trial, and then that's where we fast forward to where I had just been in the Army, and I had actually gotten to Korea. So I got to Korea, and I got this thing from my mom, and we talked, and it ends up that, the prosecutor's office of Colorado is going to be contacting you. And lo and behold, that's when I found out that my dad unalived this lady, and they were doing the trial, and they wanted me to come to the trial, which was kind of interesting back in the day, because back then, I was in the Army. I was in Korea. It's not like I'm just going to take off a week or two and just dip off to the United States to do a trial for my dad who unalived his spouse thingy person. And after going, I had a number of phone calls with the prosecutor to get information about my upbringing, because they wanted to show a pattern of abuse and blah, blah, blah. It's basically after he heard what happened from my mom, and then my side of the story, they were going to bring that into the trial. He wanted me to come and testify, but it was like, that's not gonna happen. And of course, at that time, it's like, you made your bed, you lie in it. I've got my own life. I'm not doing this. And this is before I got married. So I know we're going down some rabbit holes. So anyway, he ended up with 2009 years in prison. So obviously, with no hope of parole, like I said, the person he unalived ended up having a lot of political pull, and yeah, boom, he got 2009 years. So let's fast forward back to where I retired after the military in Colorado to do real estate. And because I needed a job, I ended up working in corrections. That was interesting because I had to list on my application, do you have any family members or do you know anybody personally that is incarcerated in the Colorado Department of Corrections? Of course, I had to say yes. And the reason they do that is kind of an important thing. They don't want to put you as a guard in the same place where you know people or have family members because you could be biased. Excuse me. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting. But he was in another facility that was far away from where I was going to be working. So, in the Colorado Department of Corrections. So, everything was cool. And then we lived in Pueblo, Colorado, which was sketchy. I think Pueblo, Colorado has the dubious distinction of being a city that has the most teen pregnancies in the United States. It's just kind of a horrible... Pueblo used to be nice. It used to be nice, and then it just kind of nosedived. And then if you're on the east side, it's terribly bad over there on the east side of Pueblo, Colorado, where we had some properties. Yeah, definitely places you don't go after dark. And yeah, it just... it's so weird. Pueblo is such a weird place because you'll have a street, will have nice houses, manicured everything, and then the next street over will look like a war zone. You'll have crack houses, and then the other street will be really nice. And we lived there for a while. We got a real good deal on a house. I bought a bank foreclosed property that was built in 1903, gutted it out, redid everything by myself, and then I did that while I was on leave. So basically, in 30 some odd days, I gutted the house, redid the inside, did the drywall, did the kitchen, did everything except for windows, and I think I had to do some tile work, and bathroom I had to redo afterwards, and carpet came later. So I did a ton of work, and then painted the outside afterwards. So it was kind of an involved project. But with that, we got a good deal, but I still needed to work. And the real estate investment thing with the family, which ended horribly, wasn't working out, so I had to get a job, so Department of Corrections. So having to drive from Pueblo, Colorado to Canyon City, Colorado, which is about 40 minutes away, every day for work, so about 45 minutes. So you drive there 45 minutes, drive back another 45 minutes, and then do 8-10 hour shifts or whatever it was. It made for long days. And then, I was working graveyards, so add that little bit of extra stress on there, which was interesting. And it was like, man, I'm just tired of driving. Usually I don't mind driving. But at that type of job and that type of stress, it's like, yeah, I need to move closer to my work, which was in Canyon City, Colorado. So a number of people had lived in Canyon City and were like, yeah, house prices, you can find some deals. If you can find a good deal, they're proud of their property prices because there's a lot of prisons in that neck of the woods. I think there's like 7 or 10 different prisons, and then you also have the federal prison, the Supermax, ADX prison there, and a couple other small federal camps within that one complex. I worked for the state of Colorado, so I ended up working for Territorial Correctional Facility, which is the oldest prison, and it was a prison before Colorado was a state. Yeah, it was really old. And then I also worked at Fremont Correctional Facility, and I did a total of just over 11 years. So the whole idea was, okay, well, if I can find a property that needs some work, I'll buy a house that needs some work. We'll fix it up. My wife, she helps and does all that stuff. She can lay tile like the best of them. And, we went into this and it was like, okay. So we found a place, And people are like, "Oh yeah, come to Kansas City. Yeah, it'll be great." And people knew that my wife was Korean, and they'd seen and I'd showed pictures. Hey, this is my wife, and yeah, the whole deal. You get to know each other, and so we got a property, and it ended up. It was only after I arrived in Canyon City that I found out that I had moved my Korean wife and I to the KKK capital of Colorado. I checked the crime stats. I checked, police response times, in the neighborhoods because I'm concerned about that, the crime, the neighborhoods. And I wanted to be in a neighborhood that had working families and good schools and so on and so forth. All the good things that you look at when you invest in a good property. You buy the worst house on the block, you fix it up, and boom, Bob's your uncle. You're settled, you're good, and it would save on my commute time. So, considering that the new house that we bought in Canyon City, Colorado, would give me like a 5, maybe 10-minute, it was like 5, yeah, it was about 5 to 10 minutes to get to work. Whether I went to Territorial or I went to Fremont, it was maybe 15 minutes, maybe if I hit all the lights red. So, so we moved and everything. And then my wife and I noticed when we would go to like Walmart, when we went to Big Ed's, Mr. Ed's, which is a horrible place, and a few other places, it just kind of an odd feeling. I couldn't put my finger on it. Now, there's a lot of older people in Canyon City, Colorado, and, we had felt kind of odd being in Pueblo, Colorado, my wife being Korean, and, in the hub of Pueblo, which was vastly Hispanic, and great people, had some good friends and stuff. But we kind of stuck out. I'm the tall white guy. My wife is the short, beautiful Asian, and didn't really see that much in Pueblo, Colorado. Excuse me, just getting over the COVID. So anyway, it ends up in Canyon City, Colorado. It's just this weird feeling. And like I said, an older population, and it was like, man, what is going on? It just gets some weird looks. And it's like, I kind of expect that from some really older people. And it's like, maybe they had never been out of Colorado. Maybe they'd never been out of, Canyon City, Colorado, or whatever it was. You expect to get some stares. Either on my end of being somebody who, small town of Kansas City, Colorado, and of course, 100-fold more for my wife being Korean, she was the first Asian and that we had ever seen. It had been years before we saw another Asian. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. So here's an interesting little thing that happened. On the main street of Canyon City, Colorado, there was a Army surplus store, military surplus store. So being the prepper gun guy that I was, zoned in on that, go in there, and it was kind of interesting because, it had a lot of cool stuff, and I bought some stuff. And the proprietor there was a pastor, actually. He said he was a rabbi, which was really interesting. And I forget his name. But anyway, he also had some interesting pictures of Canyon City, Colorado. And I'm like, hey, what are these pictures here? Oh, that's way back. And Canyon City was the KKK capital of Colorado. And I'm like, no, get out. And he's like, oh, yes. And he happened to be Jewish. And so it was kind of interesting. It's like, maybe that's why people look at us weird when we're in Walmart in Canyon City. And by that time, my wife ended up working as senior care. So she worked for a nonprofit that got grants to give grants and pay for elder-assisted care there in Canyon City, Colorado. So my wife would be working for a lot of old people. About the same time, my wife finds out that there are some pretty racist people in Canyon City, Colorado. And we also, being at Walmart, there was one time at Walmart where we're going through and we got our shopping cart and my wife and I were talking and whatever. We're happy as, we're weird like that. So we're going down the grocery aisle, and it was a cereal aisle, and there's this old guy. I mean, old guy. I'm old now. I'm sporting the gray and all that stuff. So we're going down the cereal aisle, and I'm pushing the cart, and the wife is always on my right-hand side, and this old guy, and he muttered something. And it was something derogatory about my wife. And this guy was old, like dirt old. And, had the cane and everything. And I said, "Excuse me?" And my wife's like, "No, don't cause a scene. Because my wife knows that back in my younger days, I was prone to having quite the anger. Okay. And I was very defensive about my wife. And yeah, I mean, you could call me whatever name you want in the book. That's fine. But you go after my family, we're going to have words. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. We're going to have a discussion. So he said something. I said, "Excuse me." And then he muttered something else. And then as we kind of kept going, next thing we know, he says something else about my wife being a gook. Oh, good Lord, no. We're not going to have that. So I turn around, I talk to this guy. And then, so all of this is starting to make sense now. And, yeah, the old guy, I'm like, "Hey, what's the deal, blah, blah, blah." The typical racist, gook and whatever, which is weird. It just doesn't make sense. And I told him, I said, "Hey, listen," I said, "there's no way I'm going to change your mind. But when you die, your racism is going to die with you. Have a good day." And then turned around, and so I didn't accost him. I didn't hit him. I didn't do any of that. So go ahead and smash that like button for me not being an asshole. Yeah, so that was kind of it. And then like I said, when we were at the Army, Navy, surplus store, whatever, it ends up that the guy, the proprietor, what was his name? It's right on the tip of my tongue. I can see him as plain as day. But yeah, he was a Jewish guy, and he was a rabbi of a Messianic Jewish church, which was meh. He really wasn't a rabbi. He just called himself a rabbi, and yeah, it was sketch, really sketchy. So anyway, but aside from that, he was showing me pictures of Canyon City, Colorado, and so I figured we'd go over some of those things and show you just how the KKK was the capital of Colorado. And no one told me about this until after I moved. And I asked my friends at work, some who lived in Canyon City or Penrose or Florence, and nobody brought it up. Zip, zero, nothing. Nobody brought it up until after, and I brought it up and was like, "Hey, why didn't you tell me that Canyon City was the KKK capital of Colorado back in the day?" And they're like, "Oh, well, hey, it's a thing. It was a thing." So it was like, oh my gosh, seriously. Okay, so yeah, here it is. This is it. Canyon City, Colorado adopts resolution condemning the Ku Klux Klan history in community. Its purpose is not to try to erase the history of what happened nearly 100 years ago, but to acknowledge the past with a promise to do better in the future. You would be amazed that this just came out June 8th, 2023. There it is, May 25th, June 8th, 2023. So you would think with the history of the KKK capital, and it is like almost nationally known through the circles of white supremacy and so on and so forth, that Canyon City, Colorado was the place to be if you were Klan. And clans bred like rabbits, and they passed on these feelings and belief systems and worldviews onto their offspring, and then it 100 years later, it was still in Canyon City, Colorado. It was amazing. But finally, Canyon City, Colorado, in what we end up seeing here in June 8, 2023, finally decided, hey, we should probably say we're not going to focus on this. On May 25th, 1925, the newly formed Constitutional Liberty League Party of Fremont County announced its purpose to combat the Ku Klux Klan. For nearly 100 years later, the City Council has adopted a resolution condemning all Ku Klux Klan-related activities during a short-lived but appalling period of history in the city of Kansas City. That 100 years, you think that stuff would be gone, but it wasn't. The purpose of the resolution is not to erase what happened 100 years ago, but a promise to do better. You would think something like this promise to do better, would happen, I don't know, back in the 60s or the 70s. No. 80s? No. 90s? No. We're going to wait until after the year 2000, 2023, to get a handle on this and say, yeah, we need to address this. We're going to look forward in 2023. The Kansas City Klan Clavern was organized in January 1924 and died out about 1928. Died out, that means they didn't have like parades anymore, or, the mountain of that overlooks the Kansas City, which was lined with Klan. I couldn't find that picture, but I saw it in that Army's surplus store. The whole ridgeline was filled with people in hoods, Klan hoods. So, it died out in 1928 for organized, events and so on and so forth, but it didn't die. It wasn't dead then. And it definitely wasn't dead when we moved there and my wife doing senior stuff. It was absolutely insane. Let's see. We got a comment here. Henry Parka says, unfortunately, these racist groups are not seen as terrible as it ought to be by many Americans, even today. Yes, absolutely true. KKK isn't good. And even though it was 100 years ago, there was still evidence of those thoughts and beliefs and twisted worldviews in Kansas City, Colorado, and also in Penrose. I've got a story about Penrose as well. We can't win. In the USA, my wife is that damn Chinese woman. In Korea, she is the American princess. and that brings up a point. We kind of had the same thing with me and my wife. It ended up, we got married a long time ago. We're coming up on 35 years this September. And it was kind of looked down to have that interracial marriage thing, but we're in love because, back then it was like, it wasn't good to marry an American back then. It was kind of a stigma of, you had prostitutes and then you had people that married foreigners and then so on and so forth. Nowadays, it's on Korean TV and married to a foreigner is okay and vice versa, and so whatever is totally acceptable. But back then in the day, we just didn't really fit. And then we get to the United States, and there was that stigma as well, as that, well, she's Korean, and even though the United States is the melting pot of the world, in Colorado, especially Kansas City, Colorado, people weren't as accepting. Unfortunately, so we didn't feel like we fit in Korea on the Korean side of the house, even though my wife's family accepted me and loved me and thinks I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. In the United States, we didn't feel like we fit there either. At least the places we had been, we had been to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Yeah. No racism in Oklahoma. No, absolutely not. But the military base, thank God, the military base, and you have a bunch of different people and races, and it was never a problem with the military side. It was always the people outside of the military and the places that we were in. Excuse me, kind of like Kansas City, Colorado. It was kind of fun. So anyway, it ends up that, let's get back to the stories because those are so interesting. January, a local therapist expressed concern to the council that the community is not creating an atmosphere of inclusivity, but rather allowing individuals, including children, to be treated unjustly. Absolutely true. I totally agree with that because of what we experienced as an interracial couple in Kansas City, but more so my wife than me. But we were usually around each other all the time. But when my wife had to work, there's some stories of her working for seniors under those grants in that nonprofit where she worked at that were just damn straight up racist. I mean, 100% Klan. Just it's like, holy crap. So my wife would say, yeah, you can't treat me like that. I'm not your personal slave. You don't talk to me like that. I'm a person. And she would go back to the nonprofit and tell them and say, hey, I am not working for these people because of, they said this, and this, and then they were struck from the program. Which was really weird because you also had Hispanics that worked there and things like that. But my wife was the only Asian, I think it was. I worked at the nonprofit. There were some Hispanics, but the majority were white. And yeah, it's very problematic. So yeah, very little has been said publicly in Kansas City about the KKK creating a historic legacy of white supremacy that is still alive and well. Yes, as somebody who experienced it, it was still alive and well when, yeah, I worked there. Unfortunately, no community entity has invested yet in publicly recognizing the damaging ongoing effects of growth and development of the local youth, even though examples of this abound. Said the city leaders needed to help create a safe and productive healing dialogue and support those who are inviting national cultural responsivity experts in the community to help with the discussion. Help all in Canyon City feels like they have a voice. The resolution, unanimously approved Monday, states that over time in history does not define Canyon City or what it is today, but denounces the acts of this period of prejudice and hate, stating they do not represent the collective goodwill of the people of Canyon City. They want everybody, citizens, who welcome and strives to live in peace and harmony, regardless of race, color, ethnicity, religion, culture, sexual orientation, age, national origin, gender, disability. Oh, good Lord. Let's just put the whole dictionary in there. Okay, yeah. Or any other difference. Mayor Ashley Smith, during the 1920s, the presence of the KKK was found in every state in the United States. But Colorado, it was king. It's not something unique to Canyon City. Had this presence, it was very, very common during that time. Unfortunately, yeah. This sounds like, it sounds like, well, this isn't new. Everybody had the Klan. It seems like you're kind of downplaying when you say something like that instead of just being responsible and saying, yeah, we had a sordid history and it was definitely wrong. And just leave it at that. You don't need to go into this, excuse me, this diatribe and this, back then, everybody had Klan. It's kind of like you're kind of saying, well, it was a thing for everybody, so it's not, it seems like you're downplaying it to me. Just not really a thing. And yeah. Back to the story. Okay, we got some comments here. 25 years ago, we were being screamed at by middle-aged men in the subway. Kyung Sun stood her ground and screamed back at him, "I'm just hoping I don't get arrested for making a public public disturbance." And that was in Seoul. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I mean, we had some experiences like that, and not in Seoul, but we got the looks, we got the comments, and stuff like that. And it's kind of sad that would happen. Of course, nowadays everybody is being inclusive and so on and so forth. America is the melting pot of the world, basically. We kind of lost our way as in that aspect because now we let the wolves run the hen house. But yeah, it ends up it was very, very different. But it's amazing how when they're talking about how that mentality still goes on, and it just has to die out for that to change. And the good thing is, I think with social media and television and all this stuff, people are more expecting or more accepting of people of other races. And then the more well-traveled you are, the more you realize, hey, we're all the same. We all bleed red, and your melanin content might be a little different. You might be a little pale, might be a little dark, and everything in between. But, we're still all human beings. So, it doesn't really make sense to be prejudiced against other people. So, anyway, let's jump back into this. In 1924, more than 500 Canyon City men joined the Canyon City Klan number 21 under the leadership of Reverend Fred G. Arnold. I've heard his name. And living in Canyon City, will have heard his name. Who led the title of State Leader of Colorado's Klansmen. According to the article, the Royal Gorge Museum, Colorado boasted the largest and most influential Klan following west of the Mississippi River. Yeah, I told you it was the Klan capital, and Canyon City became the Colorado State Klan headquarters. Nobody told me this at all. And I was the one that would ask questions and say, well, hey, what neighborhoods are good to live in? Which ones should I look out for? What are good for families and what are the good schools? Just kind of going over everything. Not one person that I ever talked to decided to say, oh, by the way, since you're an interracial marriage, maybe this little tidbit on the history of Canyon City being the Klan capital of Colorado, you might want to look into that before you decide to move here. Nobody said that. Yeah, it is absolutely crazy. The Klan headquarters. Yeah, crazy. Nearly 4 years, the Klan ran Canyon City's banks and government and had their own newspaper called the Daily American. I told you it was Klan, and I tell people this, and they're just like, nah, it can't be that bad. It was bad. The Klan took credit for passing bonds to build a new high school and elementary school, water bond issues to extend water mains to East Canyon. Crosses were burned in the Catholics' yards. Yeah, they were kind of a Protestant Democratic organization. Klan members marched in parades in full regalia, boycotted Catholic businesses, and pressured Protestant business owners to fire Catholic employees. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. On May 25th, the newly formed Constitutional Liberal League Party of Fremont County announced its purpose to combat the Klan. At that point in history, it was the largest ever political rally in Fremont County with 1,000 people attending. By 1926, the party boasted 2,100 members in Canyon City and Florence, which I lived in Florence. And I also lived in Canyon City. The Klan became a period of decline. Anti-Klan movements in Canyon City were led by Harry F. Boer, Foster, prominent congressman, whatever, Honor Canyon City Daily Record. In June 1st, 1928, the Grand Dragon Fred Arnold died. Yes, I've heard stories from the old folks. His death, combined with a number of Klan leadership scandals across the state, led to the end of the Ku Klux Klan influence on Colorado. Yeah, crazy stuff we're talking about there. Henry ends up saying, Americans never really reckoned with its racist history. The South lost the Civil War, but everybody just wanted to move on and started a thing known as Reconstruction. Yes, somebody who knows their history. Awesome. Also says it had the goal to reintegrate the South, but meant that the white supremacy regained power in those states. There's just so much when you look at history and how this... how everything worked, and so many moving pieces in that. But the good thing is that we're more accepting today now than we were back then, especially back in the 1920s, 1930s. But the amazing thing in Canyon City, Colorado, it was so ingrained. It was absolutely insane. I want to go over some of the stuff because some people don't believe it. It's like, no, you're embellishing on this. And it's like, no, I'm not. Here's a picture of the Ku Klux Klan. First organizational meeting of the KKK in January 26, 1924. Natatorium, a public swimming pool at the corner of Dozier and Central. And everybody's wearing their Klan hoods. Look at that. Yeah. I don't know. And the thing is that Canyon City, Colorado, a lot of people stay in Canyon City. There's not a lot of dispersion. So you have a lot of people who are these people who procreated and passed on these thoughts, ideas, and worldviews. And it still ended up at the time that my wife and I were there that, yeah, it was still prevalent in society. We would walk into stores, locally owned stores and shops and things like that, and we would get the stink eye. Because of my wife. Me, I'm tall, but, I wasn't as big back then as I am now. But, I'm obviously white, Caucasian. But yeah, we would go into stores and there was places where it was like, yeah, we got the stink eye, turn around and leave because, yeah, we were not welcome there. This happened a number of times, unfortunately. And of course, having bought the house, we can't just leave. And there's a whole story about the house that we bought. It ended up, there was a lawsuit with the city and flooding. And yeah, maybe we'll go into that into another time. But then we moved to Florence, Colorado, which is a few minutes away from Kansas City. Still had, yeah, those types of racist views. I'm just amazed. It wasn't as bad as Canyon City, but there's still elements. But we lived on a golf course, a sumo golf course, which is close to the Supermax ADX, the federal prison there. And with that, being on the golf course, I didn't play golf, but it was good because it was quiet, we're away from everybody. And, we would go to Pueblo to go to the stores there, especially the one, Walmart in Pueblo West, because it was more integrated, if you want to use that word. And, there was other Koreans and other Asians there. Of course, there's a lot of everybody in Pueblo West, but it was more forgiving than Canyon City or Florence. So, yeah, absolutely crazy. Let's see, some of the other interesting stuff. We got some other comments. When did you move to Kansas City? What year was that? I retired from the military in 2005, and I want to say it was like 2006 or 2008, I think it was, somewhere around that time. And then I had worked at the Department of Corrections for a little while, and then we decided to move. So it was either 2008 or early 2009. So, yeah. And, yeah, there's some... and it wasn't only until after I moved that people that oh, hey, I found out the Klan was here. What's the deal? Why didn't you tell me? Oh, well, yeah, it's a thing. And then it was only then that my coworkers would end up and say, oh, by the way, if you're looking for a house, we had already bought a house, but they knew that I was trying to move to somewhere else to get out of Canyon City, but still be close to work. They're like, and I'm thinking Penrose, Colorado. I'm thinking, there's wide open. It's just, you buy a couple acres and whatever. Yeah, it was really kind of interesting. Henry says, oh my gosh, so we're talking about modern times. Yes. And yeah, that continued on until we lived in Florence, which is like 5 minutes away from Kansas City. It still had a lot of racist stuff going on, and to where, we've been here 2.5 years. We spent a year in Oahu before that, and before that, so if you do the math, that's when we left Florence, Colorado. And we still had experienced elderly racism, or racism from elders and even younger people. So anyway, let's backtrack back to Penrose, Colorado, because I was like, Penrose, there were some coworkers that I knew out there who lived there. And, the way they described it is like, it's flat, it's dry, kind of like Oklahoma, brown, dry. But, you get your little, your manufactured home or whatever it is, you get like an acre or two and people leave you alone. And I'm like, hey, that sounds good, being away from people. Especially with my problems and issues, and because people don't like interracial marriages, and people are like, oh no, no, don't do that. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, you don't want to go to Penrose. And I'm like, why? And it's like, you remember the Klan thing in Canyon City? There is still white supremacy going on in Penrose, Colorado at that time. 2008, 2009. Actually, that was probably about, what was it, about 2011, 2011-ish, somewhere around there. And from what I was told and verified by multiple people, they still have the Aryan Brotherhood, which for those of you who don't know is a prison gang and so on and so forth. But there's a big white supremacy movement and within prisons. But within Penrose, Colorado, people told me don't move there. Because in the far reaches of Penrose, people have some really, really disturbing beliefs. The Aryan Brotherhood, white supremacists, the whole nine yards. And it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, there's like normal white people don't go there because of that. And so for me and my Korean wife to move out to Penrose, people were like, yeah, don't even consider Penrose. And it was like, okay, so cross that city off of, that town off the places of where to live. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was serious stuff. I remember when we were in Canyon City, we didn't see any black people. We didn't see any. And then we saw one. We saw the first one, and he ended up working at Walmart. And then, it was very, very interesting because, if me and my wife got flack for us being, my wife being Korean, imagine what he ended up. Now, as time went on, more and more foreigners or non-white people would move into Canyon City. So I got a little bit better. But that was because of the prisons. And most people worked in the prisons because there's like 10 state prisons within that area. There's also the federal prison and a couple other smaller camps within the federal one. So it was absolutely crazy. Let's see. So Canyon City, Florence, and Penrose, triangle areas drenched with racists. I do, yeah. It was very interesting. It was definitely more racist than Pueblo, Colorado. And Pueblo, Colorado is about 120, maybe 150,000 at the time population. Canyon City was like, what, 40? I can't remember. What is the population? If I can remember how to type population of Canyon City, Colorado, which was 17,000 back in 2023, 17,241. So yeah, there it is. Boom. I retired in 2005, moved there 2006 or 7, or like 2008. So I started the Colorado Department of Corrections, so shortly after that. So 2000, yeah, so it's been holding fast at around that 18,000. But it was a very interesting thing. But yeah, those areas and surrounding areas, very, very problematic. But if you go up to Colorado Springs, which was about like 45 minutes north, you'll run into Colorado Springs, which has a ton of different people, different races, Asians, blacks, Mexicans, whatever, the whole rainbow thing. Doesn't seem to be a problem. Just don't go into certain neighborhoods in Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs has gotten severely worse when it comes to crime. And so, some people are saying, well, why didn't you move to Colorado Springs? Back in the day, Colorado Springs used to be really nice. And then, again, I was in real estate. And so looking at crime reports and stats and so on and so forth, I saw this downward trend. So it was like, increasing crime and so on and so forth. And it just, that just kind of knocked Colorado Springs out of the running. There are still good neighborhoods in Colorado Springs, but it's shrinking. It shows that the dark blue of an electoral map doesn't mean anything. It just means there are a lot of people living in Denver. Yeah, Denver and that whole surrounding area, Loveland, all of those cities that are around Denver, Colorado is just a big mass just bleeds one into another, and yeah, crime's really bad, and so yeah. But yeah, it's really, really kind of interesting, and people are kind of amazed that my wife and I moved to the KKK capital of Colorado, and it's all after the fact that I found this out. Let's go back and I'll show you. Like, here's a Canyon City Daily record. Ku Klux Klan, once a Fremont County political powerhouse. What are the odds? Yeah, glee clubs. Goodbye lunch. It's just scholar. Yeah, they did all kinds of things, and it's just a weird thing. And there's the Royal Gorge. Yeah, like I said, I tried to find the picture of this overlook, this mountain. It's a road that goes up, and you can actually drive on top, and you can overlook and see Canyon City. I think on one of my earliest videos of where I do some drone stuff. But there was a picture where there's that whole ridgeline was filled with nothing but people in Klan hoods, and it was a black and white picture. Obviously, it was amazing to see that, and the Klan was so prevalent, and it was still prevalent. The guy that was the military surplus store. He was big on history and so on and so forth. And of course, he said he was Jewish. I don't know if he was. It makes me question. But even if he was Jewish, he kept track, and white supremacists would come into the Aryan Brotherhood would come into his store and try to give him flack and all this stuff because he had an Israeli flag, and they knew that he was Jewish or claimed to be Jewish or whatever. I've seen people come into a store that he was pointing to, and yeah, he's one of those. And then, of course, working in the prison, you get to know some of the people that are incarcerated that are from Canyon City and Penrose and Florence and surrounding areas that had Aryan Brotherhood written all over them, literally. Yeah. Just amazing. So even though this was back in the 1924 to 1930, basically, the Klan captured control of the Republican and Democrat parties. Klan members were elected to run city, county, and even much of the state, which is absolutely crazy. But it did originally stem from the Democratic Party. Yeah, crazy. Some of the stuff. The Klan number 1 was organized in Tennessee in 1865, and the Klan in Canyon City, Colorado was 21. So we're talking some pretty wild stuff. Primarily a vigilante group, was unhappy with the outcome of the Civil War. They hoped to restore white supremacy, terrorize murdered blacks, members of radical Republican Party who opposed slavery and favored black rights. This group fizzled out by the 1870s. Klan number 2 rose in the 19s and powerful in the 20s. Anti-black, anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, strongly prohibitionist. Membership peaked to about 4 or 5 million, but dropped by 30,000 by 1930, and eventually lost power and died. That's kind of an interesting thing, saying that it lost power and died. It lost power in regards to organized political power, but the mindset and the worldviews of the people was still evident long after that, and even evident in, I would dare say, some of the local politicians and things like that. Yeah, it's just a weird thing. Let's see. Klan number 3 was active in the 50s and 60s. On a local level, we discussed the history of our Klan. We're dealing with Klan number 2, the Klans of the 20s. He said Colorado had the largest, most influential Knights of the Ku Klux Klan organization of the west of the Mississippi River. Crazy. January 17th, 1924 edition of the Canyon City Record reported a flaming torch, likely meant to be a fiery cross, on Skyline Drive. That's the drive. Skyline Drive is the one where you could drive up there and overlook the city of Canyon City. There was a picture where it had the whole skyline had Klan members in hoods. Similar to those which had been burned from the time in Florence, Pueblo, and other parts of the state. So Pueblo had its Klan problems too. The paper 2 weeks later reported 5 burning crosses across town, including Prospect Heights, which was a neighborhood populated mostly by Austrians, Italians, and other immigrant coal miners, most of whom are Catholic born. Another reason the Klan did not like the Heights was booze. The Klan said their members did not partake in alcoholic drinks. So they were kind to their liver, but they hated other races. Crazy. Bond issues, talking about the Reverend. Reverend Arnold said to be grooming his teenage son, Cupper, to be the next Klan leader, and they both suddenly died. Cupper died at age 14, and Arnold died 4 months later, reportedly a breakdown of the summer flu from the previous year. So, karma, yeah, chalk up one for karma. Cochran said at the time of his death, Arnold held the office of the Grand Dragon of the Colorado realm of the Klan for all of Colorado, and he ran the Colorado Klan from Canyon City offices located at the old Cloud Street Hotel, which is still there. Yeah, I always wondered why I got a weird feeling about that place. Just across the alley from the Baptist Church. Yeah. The offices moved back to Denver in 1929 after Arnold's death. So if you think being in a big city, metropolitan Denver city is okay, they had a storied history as well. By then, the Klan was losing steam. In 26, few non-Klan candidates actually squeaked back into office, and non-Klan candidates were elected in 1928. The Klan bent over backwards to appear friendly to the small black population, even by donating money towards their churches, but there's no evidence that the Klan gave them any grief. There are some stories, some stuff, some rumors that went around that was like, there's other stories that say otherwise, but nothing verified. So again, there's different sides of the story. It's let's see. Oh, we got some comments here. Henry ends up saying, oops, where do we go? Let me see if I can pull that back up again. It's like Lethal Weapon 2, where the black cop goes to South Africa embassy to apply for a visa on apartheid, and the South African embassy looks at him confused. But you're black. Remember that? That was hilarious. I don't know if you know that movie. Yeah, that was kind of funny. There was a time when you would not have been allowed to something. I'm not sure, but yeah, there was a time when you wouldn't have been allowed to move into those neighborhoods. I think that's what CB was talking about there. There was a lot of heavy influence, and from the older people that I had talked to and worked in the prison system, people who had families there, there were some pretty sordid stories and events that happened in Canyon City and Penrose and Florence. And where they still, even though they supposedly died out, there was still the good old boy system. And so, in other words, it ends up, well, okay, you have somebody with the Klan and they're in charge and blah, blah, blah. And then the Klan died out because it was bad. And then, so they took off the hood, but there was still a lot of people who were brought up in the Klan, who had family in Klan, who ended up in government offices, and then you have the good old boy system connected onto that. So that was probably another reason of why there was so much racism in Canyon City, Colorado, and the surrounding areas, nepotism and a lot of things like that. Being racist doesn't seem very Christian to me. Yeah, well, people believe what they want to believe. If the Aryan Brotherhood says that they are Christian, and that they're for the white race and that they're for the establishment and, of their proud heritage and culture of the white race. And just like if you're proud to be African American or Korean or whatever race you are, the Aryan Brotherhood twists and manipulates that into their criminal organization and so on and so forth. So same thing like with Mexican gangs or any gangs for that matter. They'll take religious observances and thoughts and worldviews, and they'll twist and manipulate them to support their twisted ideology or beliefs. So yeah, it's probably doesn't seem very Christian, but I guess it depends on how you define Christian. And for the Aryan Brotherhood, if you're a God-fearing, white-believing Christian, then you're it. But people who are black or different races, you can't be a Christian So, and of course, the Aryan Brotherhood, of course, the whole white supremacy thing is saying that the God favored the Jews and then they killed Jesus, and then the whole thing. I've had interesting discussions in prisons with inmates who are of the Aryan Brotherhood and white supremacists, and just wild, that God ended up choosing the white Americans, and that they are now the favored race because the Jews killed Jesus, and it's kind of a weird thing. Yeah. Wouldn't Jesus look very Middle Eastern to them? Yeah, imagine that. But through some weird type of ideology and a perversion of religion in the Bible and so on and so forth, and then you add in this multicultural, no, that's not us. We need to be proud of our race as other races are proud of their race, but we're just getting hammered for that because, whatever it is. It's just kind of this weird thing. But yeah, Jesus is kind of Middle Eastern. He's kind of Jewish. So I just found that odd. And working in prisons and stuff like that, it was really, really weird. We got a question. CV says, did you work on the prisons? Yes, I did. If you weren't here at the beginning, but what I ended up saying is that after I retired from the military, doing real estate investing, and then that wasn't enough to pay the bills, so I had to get a job. So an old Army buddy said, hey, come work in the prisons. It's the easiest money you're going to make. And most of the prisons are in that neck of the woods around Kansas City, Colorado. I think there's like 10 state prisons there, Territorial, Fremont, a number of other ones. I worked at Territorial and Fremont correctional facilities for over 11 years. And then after I did my 11 years, I went back to the prisons and did prison ministry for a few years. So, yeah, I was a glutton for that. But, with that, when I did the prison ministry, I was because I was being a believer and stuff like that. And my heart goes out to maybe because of my dad, who had 2,009 years in prison. Obviously, he never served his term. He died. No parole. But with that, there was a lot of veterans in prison. And so me being a retired veteran and seeing other veterans that were having problems with PTSD and having problems with readjusting to civilian life, many of them turned to drugs and crime, ended up in prison. And you got to do a lot to go to prison. You really do. So we're talking bottom of the barrel there, but my heart went out for these men and even the other people that weren't vets. And so in the prison ministry, it was about personal accountability. It's about learning how to be a man. And getting rid of this twisted ideology of gangs and drugs and, Aryan Brotherhood and racism and all this stuff. But in prisons, inmates will twist religion like the Aryan Brotherhood does for the Bible. You will have Muslim groups that do the exact same thing with the Quran. And they'll twist and manipulate it to do their gains, And the same thing in like MS-13 and the other Norteños and Sureños, things like that, Mexican gangs in prisons, that they will use a perverted view of religion to support and bring about kind of a family feeling of togetherness and closeness, albeit it's a very dysfunctional and twisted way of having some type of community and closeness of a family that they never had, and that has been replaced by being in a gang, never having support and all this stuff. And then you come to a place where, hey, you can be one of us, and we're all about family, we're all about God and love, and they wear their rosaries and so on and so forth. Pretty much every gang has some type of religious affiliation that supports, and then they twist and manipulate that to support their illegal activities. So yeah, it was very, very interesting. On that part of working in prisons, it was huge. Seeing sovereign citizens, a lot of white supremacists are sovereign citizens. That's a huge thing. Let's see, we got a comment. How do we deal with these people if they're being this delusional and hate-filled? We shouldn't just let it run its course. The next generation and those families will keep carrying that rotten soul. That's absolutely true. But with that, the other side of the coin of living in Kansas City and Florence is that I would also see people whose children and grandchildren went away from that because you're talking about a time in the 20s, the 30s, 50s, 60s, 70s, things like that. And then the people after that, there's more progressive, you had civil rights movement going on and so on and so forth. And so kids tend to be, I guess you could say, they have more exposure to the world instead of being cloistered in one city and never leaving and never have any outside experiences with different races. Following generations actually find out, hey, yeah, John, the black guy, he's kind of cool. He's just like us. And so those worldviews change, but many of those are still passed on, and really it's unfortunate. I've met people on both sides of the coin, people that were hardcore racists at work. Yeah, correctional officers that were racist and didn't like blacks or Hispanics, and then in the discussion, it's like, hey, my wife's Korean, right? Well, yeah, but she's not like those other races. I've had people tell me that, and it's like, oh, well, thank you, kind sir. There are some people that will stick to that ideology, and then there's other people that will reject it. And as soon as they're out of the house, they're like, I want nothing to do with my racist family members. I don't support it. I don't condone it. I reject it. And, I've talked to people who have grown up in that type of environment to where they left and they totally cut off their family members because their family was racist. So, yeah, I've seen both sides of the coin there. It's just kind of an odd thing. In an event, like I said, in the Walmart when we had the old guy, my wife ran into a number of racist people. I've run into racist people, and it's just like you see racist people at the library. I mean, in Canyon City, Colorado, we would go to the library. The wife would go to the library because she likes books and it's a nice, quiet place. She experienced racism in the library where elderly people would leave snide comments to her and oh, what are you doing here? It's a public library. That's what I'm doing here, But eventually some people are not going to change. And the good thing is the racism is going to die with them. So, yeah. Yeah, very interesting. And now going back to it ends up losing steam, blah, blah, blah. Canyon City, the Klan bent over backward to appear friendly to small blacks. There's no evidence of any grief. We talked about that. There was actually stories that I heard where they caused grief. Yeah, y'all don't want to move here. and so they don't move there. But there were some that made it in, and then it was like, yeah, well, we can't hang them, so we just won't deal with them. Yeah. Cochran says, what remains of the Klan groups has morphed through the years that has now been ruled by the courts as a subversive and terrorist organization. So, yeah, that was the reason why people said, hey, don't go in certain parts of Florence or Penrose. Be careful of these areas. And even if you kind of go further out into the neck of the woods, which is, out in the mountains and stuff like that, people who do off-the-grid stuff, yeah, there's a number of those to be careful of. Today, it is estimated there are about 150 Klan chapters still active in America. Isn't that crazy? With about 5,000 members total. If those were evenly distributed, that would be about 3 chapters per state with 35 per chapter. I don't know. Maybe we should deport them. I think that'd be a good idea. If you're part of a terrorist subversive or terrorist organization, then yeah, you shouldn't have the right to live in the United States. So that's my 2 cents. So, yeah, let's see what else we got here. Oh, here's another picture. KKK members riding a Ferris wheel in Canyon City, Colorado, April 1926. And there they are, all in their hoods. I mean, that's crazy. Photo by Rolf. That is insane. And the stories I heard, in talking about this stuff was actually crazy. It just makes you wonder. It's like, how all this came about. But it's just kind of amazing on where and how you see racism. Henry says, I met somebody at work who was a hardcore racist against people from the Middle East and Africa, but loved Asian people. He loved martial arts and Bruce Lee, so it's kind of strange. Yeah, that pick and choose racism. We like these, but we don't like these over here. Every race has got their own problems, but to have a worldview to where you are automatically biased against anybody because of their race, that's problematic. Now, I'm all for personal accountability and responsibility, and if you do stupid, you should get consequences for doing stupid. Imagine that. I've done stupid, and, I had to have those consequences served upon me when I went to jail as a youth, and hence the reason I went to the military. There's a whole story behind that, but yeah, it's just weird. But the good thing about me is that I was born in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Base, actually at the Air Force Academy, because my dad at the time was in Vietnam, and so my mom was living with her parents, my grandparents, and my grandfather was at the Air Force Academy. So he worked there, and then eventually he did, 30 years? He did 30 years. It started out in the Army Air Corps, and then it became the Air Force. So then he took the Air Force side. So he did that for 30 years, and then he did 10 years of government service and ended up as a GS 13 or 14 and retired. And then, so he did 40 years of service. That was crazy. But being in Colorado at that time, the stories of my grandparents, my grandfather being in the military from the Air Corps, the Army Air Corps. So we're talking he was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He served in those. And I would say that my grandfather was probably racist, but he was progressive, but then back then it was really weird because he called people coloreds. That was an accepted term back then. But he'd be like, yeah, I remember we had a bunch of coloreds working for us and, great people and working hard and blah, blah, blah. But I think the good thing about the military is that you throw in people from everywhere. And me being in the military was probably one of the greater things that happened in my life. Aside from, foreign wars and fighting for oil that, and chemical weapons of mass destruction that were never there. We're not going to talk about that. But being able to interact with so many people from so many different races, from so many different walks of life, and really understanding that you're focused on a mission, you're focused on being a team, and so it didn't really make a difference who was colored, whatever color the rainbow they were. It was about doing the mission, work hard, play hard, and you've got your brother's back. So oh, yes. Archie Bunker used the term colors. Yeah, that was a crazy show. Because at the time that came out, that was groundbreaking. Because it pushed so many boundaries when we're talking about racial relations. And if you watch it now, or if you show people now, young kids now in their 20s, and you show them Archie Bunker, it'd be like they'd be appalled. And in that context, they're rightly so. How could you do this? Or Archie Bunker, moving on up. What was the name of that show? I can't remember. About the Jeffersons. That, and then Sanford and Son. If you showed those shows, people would be appalled today. But the thing is that those shows were actually groundbreaking in pushing the bounds and really showing that, hey, it's, we need to get past all of that old stuff. And while there's still racist overtones in those shows, it was really pushing the boundaries at that time, and which was crazy. And but now the good thing is, even though we have a sordid history, every country has a sordid history. Everybody has done wrong. Everybody is screwed up. But as we progress over time, we become more accepting and we become less stupid, which is kind of a good thing. Let's see. Henry says, if you're actually forced to work with people of different races towards a common goal, you generally start seeing them as fellow human beings and not as the other. That's absolutely true. It is it is absolutely true. And the interesting thing is being from Colorado, and then I lived in Arizona, and then, which was, Colorado back at the time was predominantly, I would say, grew up basically white. Moved to Arizona, lived in Arizona for a while. That was basically white. Didn't know any different races. Didn't have an integrated school or anything like that. But being a kid, I didn't really care. Watch TV, and of course, TV, you have all kinds of races going on. So it didn't really bother me. My first stepfather, was it my first stepfather? Yeah, my first stepfather, he was pretty racist. He was a drunk, he was a racist, it was pretty bad. If he caught me watching TV that had blacks, I would get beat. And at that time, I loved the Harlem Globetrotters for the comedy and the skill that they had. I just really loved that. Of course, my grandparents didn't have a problem with any of that stuff, but my stepdad, yeah, he didn't like that, and I got a lot of beatings. And then, Happy Days, stuff like that. If it was a white show, then I was allowed to watch it, but then I didn't really understand why black shows were bad or black people were bad. I just thought it was stupid. Of course, I thought him being a drunk was stupid as well. So it was an example to me of growing up. You can either accept that type of mentality and have that as part of you and your worldview, or you can reject it and say, you know what, when I grow up, he's an example of what I don't want to be, so I'm not going to be that. And yeah. But yeah, when you work around other people of other races and you find out it's not a big deal, and you end up being in the military was awesome because you ended up with the fried chicken and the chitlins, and I don't like chitlins, but all the different foods and all the different cultures, and then you had the Puerto Ricans, and then you had the Mexicans, and then you had the whites, and then you had, I come from a lot of German stock, so we got Oktoberfest and so on and so forth, but it was amazing on how all of us could come together in the military and have barbecues. And everybody would bring their food, and everybody had some great food. So, and then we found out it's like, hey, this is really good. Do you like this? Oh, this is awesome, man. And then that kind of brought us even closer together. So while we did have this thing in the military that you're going to back your battle buddy, you're going to have their back regardless. You're going to support them in battle and whatever. And when you go out and party, you're going to look after each other regardless of what race you are. This kind of solidified that even more. And so I found more acceptance and more family in the military than I did anywhere else. So I got to give it to the military for that. CB says, All in the Family was very progressive. Yes, it was. That was a huge one. Henry says, he beat you for watching TV programs with black people on it. Yeah, that's effed up. But the crazy thing about that is when you're a kid and you grow up in that, you don't know that that's not normal. So my normal growing up with my my dad, alcohol, anger issues, so on and so forth, I just thought that's what every kid had, when I got my stepdad, and he had the same thing, alcoholic, anger issues, beat me, for whatever. I remember he beat me with a lamp cord because I got up in the middle of the night and got a drink of water. Absolutely insane, but I didn't know that wasn't normal. I thought that was normal. And so my first sleepover at a buddy's house, I was amazed. I brought this up in another video, but we go to my friend's house, and it was the very first sleepover, and then the family sat down to dinner. And I'm like, okay, this is weird, because we never did that. We did it at my grandparents' house, but not at my family's house. And then it's like, okay, everybody's dressed nice, and they're talking nice to everybody. I'm on pins and needles because I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the six-pack to show up. Boom, Dad to start slamming down beers and getting mad and throwing beer cans at the TV. I'm waiting for that to happen. So I'm just like, let's hurry up and get it over with. None of that happened. And then we played games. we played a board game with the whole family, mom, dad, my buddy, and me. And it was cordial. And I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then there were no beatings that night. I was like, this is odd, you know. Oh, do you guys want to watch TV? Go ahead. You know, there's the show, you know, watch whatever you want. And I was just like, wow, I never got to choose what I wanted to watch. You know, if my stepdad was there, no. It was, very controlling, very domineering, very manipulating, very dysfunctional. So I did not know that was not normal. It wasn't until I was, 8, 9 years old that I found out that wasn't normal. You know, normal was sitting down, having a family dinner and so on and so forth, and, you know, mom and dad having a good relationship, not yelling and fighting each other, you know, throwing beer cans and bottles across the room, you know, just, beating me for no reason. God damn that son of a bitch at work, you know, and then beat me, you know. It was like, I didn't know that was not normal. And as a kid, it was like, you just accept that. I don't know, maybe people who don't go through such severe toxic dysfunction can't relate to this, but as a kid, it was just normal. That was my normal because that's what I grew up in. But later on, when I started to get a clue, then it was like, okay, everybody's going to be an example. You're going to be an example of what I'm not going to do as a man. You're an example of what I'm not going to do as a father. And then the other people I would seek out, and, you know, like my buddy's family, you'd be like, yeah, I want to have that. I want to have a good relationship. I don't want the alcohol and the yelling and the fighting and the screaming. So everybody is an example one way or the other. So I guess it just kind of depends on what you want. And if you that moment, that click, that aha was like, wow, this is different. Huh. And so I started spending the night at a lot of my friends' house because I realized that would be a safe haven for me. Yeah, so I really wanted that. Yeah, kind of crazy. Yeah, definitely effed up for sure. So anyway, yeah, a lot of interesting things as far as moving my Korean wife and I to the KKK capital of Colorado, which none of my coworkers told me about until after I moved, you know. And it's not like I didn't turn a blind eye, you know. And I think if I had lived there and somebody says, hey, you know, what do you think about me, an interracial couple, moving to Canyon City, and if I was somebody from Canyon City, you think you would bring that up. You think I would say, hey, don't know if you know this, but our past is very checkered, and there's still a lot of racism going on in Canyon City area, Penrose, Florence area, back at that time. So you might want to, you know, look into it. I don't know, just do some research. You know, yeah, they got some nice houses, some, you know, the Royal Gorge and the whole 9 yards. You've got all that, big tourist area. But as far as the everyday people, yeah, there's still some racists here. You think somebody would have said that, but nobody did, that pissed me off. Henry ends up saying, you become the person you are today is proof that growing up in a violent household doesn't necessarily mean you have to give in to hate and become your stepfather. Yeah. Or my father, or, you know, yeah. It's definitely don't want to become my mother as well. So, but the good thing is that during my time, because I joined the military, and my second stepdad, he was military. He got out after Vietnam. He was a helicopter pilot. He had some PTSD issues as well, but he didn't know how to be a dad. And so it was kind of like 3 strikes, you're out. You know, mom didn't know how to pick him. But she couldn't be alone, so she had that dysfunction. She had that need to have to be with somebody. And, you know, she just chose to be with the dysfunctional ones. And I guess birds of a feather flock together. So, yeah, it ended up, it was a very interesting thing. But with that, going into the military, basically, you know, my grandparents, I lived with my grandparents for a while, so they taught me a lot of things, and a lot of that was centered around the military. my grandfather being in the Air Force, my grandmother, they had been to Europe, moved around. Again, all the experiences that they had was more multicultural than most other people of the day, compared. So that really put me onto the path of, you can find a place in the military. You can find a home. You can have a family outside of your family by being in the military. And so when it got to the place of where, I went to jail and the judge is like, hey, you got to have a plan for your life. I'll make this all go away. I decided to join the military. Little did I know that your juvenile records are sealed, and my juvenile records were not serious enough to keep me out of the military. It was a way for the judge to, it's an old school thing, he caused problems, so let's make sure that we pass him on to the military, and the military will deal with him, So, it was absolutely crazy. Talking about Colorado, Alan Berg was a Colorado radio show host who was shot dead by KKK radicals. That name sounds familiar. Alan Berg. Crazy. Let me see if I can find something. Alan Berg. Oops. B-E-R-G. Here it is. Alan Berg. He was crazy. Alan Berg. Let's take a look at him. Because the name is familiar, but I'm just not familiar with that. Alan Berg, January 34 to 1984. I went into the Army in 85. American talk show host in Denver, Colorado, born to a Jewish family. Aesthetic and liberal views and confrontational style. So he's kind of like a blogger, podcaster. He was assassinated by members of the white supremacist group The Order, which believed in killing all Jews, sending all black people to Africa. Those involved in killing were part of the group planned to kill prominent Jews such as Berg. Two of Berg's killers, David Lane. David Lane. Yep. He's convicted and sentenced to 190 years in prison. Convicted on charges of federal civil rights violations for killing him. They were sentenced to 190 years and 252 years in prison, respectively. So, that was back in 84. So, crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Yeah. Crazy that these racist places still exist in the early 2000s is quite depressing. It is. But the good thing is that I can attest to is that over the period of time, those places have gotten better. So from the time that we moved to Canyon City, Colorado, and then, the first time we went to Walmart, you get that weird, uneasy feeling and so on and so forth. I would say it was like maybe less than a month, and we figured out why. The Klan capital of Colorado. From what we experienced then until the time just before we moved and decided to be American expats and live overseas, we did see improved relations. We did see more and more people denounce that type of racist ideology and worldview, especially with the younger generations. The older generations are going to die out. Some of them aren't just ever going to change. Blacks are always going to be blacks, and they're always going to be racist. And, it doesn't matter. You can't change, those type of people. So their racism will die with them. But the good thing is that the younger kids, they grow up and they have more access to education. They have the internet, they have TV, they have things that they can see from different countries. And, with other cultures moving in and them becoming friends with other people that are not the same race as them, they start to realize, kind of like the military, they don't see anything wrong with that, and so they grow up with not seeing anything wrong with that. So in their lives, as they grow and go to school and get jobs and work in local communities, that racism dies out over time. So, with that being said, we did see a lot of advancements and less racism in Canyon City, Florence, and Penrose over time. In the prisons, not so much. There's still those hardcore, stupid people. But even in prison, you would see how there's a decline in that type of, in racism. And there's racism for all races. In prison, there is racism against, there's the blacks, the whites, the Hispanics, the Asians, all of that. Every ethnic group or racial group that you have in prison, they all have some type of twisted racism in their own groups because they don't like each other, they don't like blacks, they don't like whites, they don't like this or that or whatever. They all have this weird worldview, and they use racism to justify their identity and also justify the crimes that they do. So it takes generations for prejudices to go away. Yes, it does. It takes generations, but some people are more progressive than others, and I know that's kind of might be saying a word that might trigger some people, but we really need to progress and move on. And when you realize these things of, hey, especially early on in my life, when you realize you join the military or, you find out, hey, I got to work with all different types of people and they the same manner, you end up, it's like, they're just like me. They eat different food. They have different cultural backgrounds and things that they do, or they have different religions that they follow. I've met atheists, I've met Satanists, I've met pagans, I've met, all types of different people in the military. But really, the great part about that is that it didn't matter. Do what you're going to do, but I still got your back, because the person is what's important. What they do, and if what they do harms and goes against the life, liberty of other people, then that's when I have a problem. But if it doesn't do anything harmful to anybody else or children or anything like that, it doesn't matter. I got your back. And I think more prejudices should go away, especially in the area of politicalness. Now, I know this is going to get a little rough. Let me take a swig here. Is that there used to be a time where you could be friends with somebody of the opposite political party that you follow, and there wouldn't be a problem. It's kind of agree to disagree, but we wouldn't let that, even in the military, we had that. And this is coming from somebody who used to be a Democrat, who used to be a Republican, is now an independent. But even in all of those phases, and you could even say that I might be a libertarian in some aspect, but definitely an American citizen, supports the Constitution. But it didn't really bother me if you believed in a certain political, as long as you didn't call me names for what I believed and espoused and followed. But then I wouldn't push that on other people as well. I'm just kind of a factual guy. Let's look at the facts. Let's get good ideas from whichever side of the aisle, and let's do what's good for a country as a whole. But like I said, I've had people that were atheists, and I was a staunch Christian believer, and I wouldn't have any problems with them. We would get along great. Some of my best friends are atheists. I've known people that were Satanists, and you would think, there's going to be a war, and it's like, because, you believe in Satan and you believe in God, and, all hell would break loose. And it's like, no. We need to get to a place where we're mature and adult and civil to recognize that even though somebody has different views than us, we're still human beings. And with that, I think we've lost that today. So over time, as we've gotten better of not being racist in all groups and categories, because everybody is, or has been at some point in their lives, we've kind of lost that along the way. We've lost the maturity and civility of being adults, mature adults. Anybody can grow up, but you can be an idiot. You're going to be an adult idiot. But being an adult and being mature and civil is where it really comes down to. And so if we can put aside our distances and say, hey, and I've told people, I've had people rail against me. Funny thing is, this one guy at work, he hated me for what I believed in. And for me, I was just like, okay, I don't know what to tell you, but that's what I believe, but I'm not going to hold it against you, and I'm not going to push it on you. But he thought it was his job to push his belief system on me, and that I was wrong and going to hell and all that whole thing. So anyway, it was kind of funny because it ended up that he wouldn't back me This is working in a prison. He told me, if you have problems, you better hope I'm not at work because I'm not going to help you out. Because I believe differently than him, which is weird. It's like, well, I hope that's not the case, but if you're ever in trouble, I've got your back, regardless of what you believe. And that includes inmates as well. Even though you have people that are in Brotherhood or Norteños and Sureños and things like that, the different gangs, I'm still going to come to the aid of those people regardless, because that's my job, and that's what professionals do. So long story short, it ends up this guy at work who really hated me for what I believed, he was broke down on the side of the road one day. So I'm driving into work. He was driving, and I saw, and he's like trying to wave down cars. So I went over across the median because it was just dirt, and I pulled up. Boom! There it's him. It's kind of hard to miss a guy who's wearing a correctional officer uniform. So it's this guy, and it's like, hey, what's up? And he's like, oh shit. He's like, of all the people that had to stop, it had to be him. And it was like. And he was the guy that told me, it's like, I hate you, I don't like you, I think you're going to hell, whatever, and I'm not going to have your back. Here I am pulling up and helping him deal with his situation. He had mechanical problems with his truck, and nobody had stopped. His phone had died and whatever, so, I was like, hey, here, use my phone, and you need a ride, we can leave your truck here, I can, take you into town and stuff like that. And it was just kind of this weird thing. And, but I think we made some headway with that, because after that he wasn't as militant in his beliefs, and he would actually say hi to me and so on and so forth. Never said sorry, but he was definitely more personable after I helped him out. So let's see. We got some more comments. The recent assassinations in Minnesota were done by former evangelical pastor. Yeah, there's a lot of pastors who've done some crazy stuff, and so doesn't mean all pastors are bad, but if you're dumb, you're dumb. Henry, Democrat and Republican being friendly with each other, controversial take. Sigh. How did it go so wrong? It's just weird on how we have so much information available to us today, and yet we isolate ourselves to the point of where we rail and hate people and will actually commit physical crimes against other people, against their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness because they believe in a different political view. It doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make sense to me, just kind of weird. So, yeah. That kind of ends up some of the history of a little background into me and how, I took my Korean wife and we moved to the KKK capital of Colorado. And that's the story behind that. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So, very interesting. And, maybe the question pops up is like, well, is this a reason why I became an expat and retired overseas? I don't think so. I mean, maybe a very small part, but I think the bigger part was working and the expenses, and we just didn't, like I said, my wife and I, we just don't feel like we fit in America, but then we didn't feel like we fit in Korea either. So you might be asking, well, why did you go back to Korea? Well, we feel at home on military bases. So when we see people in military uniforms, when we go onto a military base, it's kind of like, because there's a lot of people like us. There's a lot of people who have interracial marriages, and there's more diversity. I know some people might trigger some people. Oh, he said diversity, he's for diversity. But when you go onto a military base and you get that melting pot of all different types of people in uniform and under, that's how we basically lived. I joined the military. That's what I came up in, married my wife, and then I did my 20-year career in the military. That was home for us. So being on military bases was a safe place for us, to kind of use the vernacular for, today. It was really comforting to be on a military base because there was other people like us. And so we drew comfort in that. And when we did barbecues, and I would do, cookouts at my house and invite all the guys in my team and my section to the house. And, we go out drinking out in the Ville in Korea, and then I'd bring all the guys back to our little apartment, and, the wife would cook food, and we had, black, white, and every color under the sun, would come and hang at our house afterwards because, we didn't make it back to base. And then cook breakfast for him and everything. And so we really had a great bonding experience. And it just, I don't know, it felt more like family on a military base than anywhere else. So while we're retired here in Korea, we're close to Camp Humphreys, which is the largest U.S. overseas military base in the world. And so we get comfort from that because we're around other people like ourselves, contractors, military, their spouses, people with interracial marriages and every which way that you can. That's comforting for us because it's like we can relax. And I've talked to other people as well, and I think it's kind of the same thing. You don't really fit on the American side 100% because you're military and or you have a foreign spouse, and you don't really fit in Korea because you have a foreign spouse. But being in the military, everybody comes in and you get to work with each other, and it's just kind of like you can relax because it's comforting. I don't know. That's just how I feel. So anyway, it just some interesting stuff. I thought that was kind of cool and to put out into a video and kind of give some background. But if I had to say the biggest reason why we moved overseas is because of the mounting expenses in the United States to live, and we were able to retire early by moving overseas. If I was going to retire in the United States, I'd have to work till I was almost 70, but when you start doing the expenses, expenses would go up every single year, like our property tax would go up every single year at a minimum of $100. So you project that out, 15 years out, are you going to be able to to afford your property tax? And then the increases in expenses and so on and so forth. You start doing the projections, you're like, holy crap, I don't know if I'm going to be able to retire. And that's unfortunately a lot of seniors. I saw a survey said that 3/4 of seniors that are eligible to retire can't retire because of the mounting expenses. So when we looked at Korea, it ends up that here in Korea, our expenses are less than half or less than what we're paying in the United States, which allowed us to retire early, and we can still save some money. So, and we're kind of loners. The wife and I are basically kind of loners. We do our own thing. She's my best friend, and vice versa. So we don't mind hanging around each other. We have a big place, so we still have our own space and stuff like that. But it just ends up that was probably one of the bigger reasons. And being able to retire early, I wouldn't be able to do that in the United States. We were able to do it overseas. And of course, we were able to get the F4 and F1 visas, which allowed us to retire early. So all for it. Okay, let's get to some comments. Henry says, but in Korea, at least it doesn't feel hostile. That's true. That is actually true. I have never felt unsafe in Korea. And that's saying something. First time I got here was in 1988, just prior to the Olympics. And even though I had been, before I got married, I had been in some seedier places and in establishments that probably shouldn't have been in, I never felt unsafe in Korea. My hair went up on the back of my neck, but I have never been accosted. I've never been robbed. I've never had, I did have a run-in with a drunk Korean guy once when we were out and with some buddies, and it almost went to fisticuffs, but then the night ended with us going to a bar. I bought him a drink, and next thing you know, we're drinking buddies. It was an awesome time. So that was the closest I've ever been to being unsafe in Korea. Crime rate is extremely low. Now there's so many CCTV cameras everywhere that, that's going to be in the back of your mind. But yeah, the crime is really low. And again, of course, being 6'2" and 260 pounds, that's kind of a thing that helps with that. But yeah, it's really good. Let's see. CB says, I get it. The base would provide a sense of community for sure. Yeah. And I kind of noticed that with a lot of other people, similar people that I've talked to that are in our situation. Somebody who has a Korean spouse, somebody who's in the military, they come and retire here in Korea. They don't fit in the United States. They don't fit in Korea, like that. But there's this middle of the road because you had that military sense of community that's where you fit. And so, back in the day, I didn't really understand why you would see the old retired guys hanging around the food courts or stuff like that, or, with their foreign spouses. It was like, I didn't understand, but I get it. I get it because that's what we do, And, it was funny because when I was young and stupid, now I'm just old and stupid. When I was young and stupid, I would look at people like that and say, man, what, don't you have a life? Old guy just comes around and hangs around military base food court. I don't understand why, and him and his wife. And it's just, you're retired. Go do something fun. I didn't realize that at the time. And no one told me, But as young people, you're prone to thinking stupid and not thinking. Imagine that. But as I got older, then I started realizing in this sense of community and the need for community doesn't go away when you go old. So when you get old, you still want that sense of community. And so it was like kind of eye-opening when I realized that. It's like, wow, interesting, And to be honest with you, it ends up that it's, you get old, but your mind doesn't get old. I mean, yeah, eventually you might get dementia or whatever and get old. But, you still want that sense of community. You still have a sense of belonging. Everybody has that to some degree. So now when my wife and I, when we go on post and we go to the food court and we're having our lunch after our workouts and stuff like that, I think back and I see people that are older than us, and I see them, people in their 70s, with their spouse and they're eating, and it's like, I get it because now I'm doing the same thing. I get it. And then you see the younger soldiers and their spouses, and you look at them and you're like, hey, we used to be young. And they're going to follow in the footsteps. And then you see the young single soldiers that don't, they kind of, look down on you or whatever, or they give just kind of this weird glance to the really, really old people that are doing that. And you're like, they didn't get the light bulb. They haven't got the clue yet, but they will. So. CB says, for most, the body goes before the mind. Yeah. My plan is I'm going to die at 85 in my sleep. Both my wife and I, we go at the same time. That's the plan. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But, we're going to try to work out and see what happens. But that's kind of the plan. Hit 85, healthy. I don't want to be like bedridden or anything like that. I just want to, maybe a day after the gym, the wife and I, we go and then boom, lay down, fall asleep, and then we don't wake up, and that would be awesome. That's the plan. Hopefully that will be the plan. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of what we got going on. I just want to kind of do a little video on that. And Henry says, "Aw, that's romantic." The wife says I'm a keeper, so yeah, it's kind of romantic when I said that. So she likes that sentiment as well. But yeah, that's some interesting backstory on me. And being a retired expat here in Korea, kind of relive some of the things, kind of pass on and share some of the stuff that I experienced. And I don't know too many people who could say that their interracial marriage and took their foreign wife and moved to a KKK capital of Colorado. I thought that would make an interesting discussion, to say the least. Oh, crazy. But yeah, it's been good. Seen a lot of changes over the years, and the good thing is, seen good times, bad times, but overall, as things go on, things get better, especially if you hold yourself to be a mature and civil adult. And you can overlook things. You can overlook I believe this, or my religion is this, and your religion is that. And it's like, well, cool. We might believe different things, but I still got your back. We might have different political views and so on and so forth, but I still got your back as a human being. And we should come to a place of where, it doesn't matter because things change over time. There's people that I knew that were staunch this or that, and then 10, 15 years later, they're the exact opposite. So life is malleable, it's flexible, and people change in their perceptions and their worldviews, their ideas, their philosophies, ideologies. And to isolate yourself because of one thing that you believe and not having meaningful relationships, in other words, stifling relationships or just isolating yourself, is not the way to go. Because then you're going to find out, because life is not about ideology. It's not about the belief, and if nobody believes like me, I don't want to have a relationship with anybody, you're going to end up pretty lonely. And then we should be mature and civil enough to be able to understand is that, we might have some differences, but we can set those aside and we can still enjoy each other's company. There's people that I know that have way opposite beliefs than what I do. But back in the States, it was like, you know what? Because we had some things in common, like guns and ammo and shooting and this and hunting and whatever, that despite those other things that we totally disagreed upon, totally opposite, we were still able to say, hey, let's just not talk about that stuff and let's just enjoy the things that we can do together and that we do enjoy. And that we do, we love our families, and when we want our kids to grow up to be responsible and mature adults, let's focus on the commonalities that we do have. And then the things that we disagree about, it's fine. Do what you're going to do as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. So, yeah. Henry says, I enjoy these life news philosophy themed streams. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, it took me a while to get a clue, but eventually it's kind of good to look back and see these things. CB says, nice stream. Thank you. You're very welcome. Appreciate that. If you like and subscribe, I would appreciate that. Hack. We have a new person. Love what you're saying. Proper gospel music to my ears. Yes. People should be more accepting and realize that if you isolate yourself because of whatever you believe, you're missing out on the whole experience of being a human, is having a relationship with other humans and being to help each other out. That's what I think it really comes down to. And, when people go through hard times and it ends up, even though you've got totally different views, I've had people who had family members die and people that had totally opposite views, it ends up, able to give them comfort despite that. And that's appreciated at times, or help people out or whatever it is. Anyway, Henry pops up and says, thanks for the stream. A good night from my part of the world, and we'll see you next time. And with that, Henry, you're welcome. Thank you for joining, and everybody else. And I think we're going to be signing off here as well. So again, like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. If you need to contact me, there's my official email address, officialtheverylife@gmail.com. I answer everybody that emails me. The scrolling ticker, people who bought me coffee, you could be one of those highly respected people. If not, no big deal. Just like and subscribe. And it's kind of fun doing these things. So with that, my protein latte is getting cold. So we're going to do that and let's see. Some people will say that it's a very hippie or utopian point of view where I'm located. Yeah. And Hack ends up saying, have a good one. Yeah, and you as well. And everybody else, thanks for watching. I appreciate that. And again, like and subscribe, because do some video stuff, some hobby stuff, miniature painting, expat in Korea. We share our experiences on our channel. And so if you have questions about, if you have somebody with Korean ancestry and you want to think about retiring in Korea, there's a way that you can do that. Just enjoy it. And thanks for the conversation, people. I really do appreciate that, because this gives me a sense of community as well, being retired over here in Korea. So you're helping me, and I enjoy it as well. So probably more so than you really understand. So, all right, with that, we'll see you. Take care, everybody, and see you on the next video. Peace. Good stuff.